have to name names. I said you don't have to name names.
No, but I wanted to make sure that they did. Hi, Chad. It's good to see you. Give you in and how are you? What's going on?
Can we be seated? The Lord be with you. Does it every time. Well, it's my pleasure to introduce John Landry. I visited him in the hospital recently and brought him the Blessed Sacrament and prayed over him. But his very presence to me was a real gift of grace. He was born in Cambridge, Massachusetts in 1943, raised and educated as a French-Canadian Roman Catholic. He was fostered as an infant in the Landry family and signed his own adoption papers at the age of 16. He grew up on, how do you pronounce it, John?
Nahant.
Nahant? Little Nahant, a small island of the North Shore of Massachusetts. He began attending the Church of the Redeemer when he met his future wife, Gail, in 1986, and was received into the Episcopal Church a few years later. He served as senior warden under Father Robinson in the year 2000. And so I'm going to introduce John Landry to you, and before I do that, if any of you have an interest in sharing your own faith journey, please see Ed Weber or the office. All of us have a faith journey, and we'd love to have more of you share it with us. John?
Thank you, Father. Good morning.
Good morning.
Wow, almost a full house. This many people have had an experience, have they? Let's talk about that a little bit. It took Ed Weber 10 years to get me to do this. Some of it was my fault. The rest was Ed's. I think people don't come up and talk about some of these things because of the things that follow afterwards. People start to label you and start to think of other things about what you might be thinking. And I waited and I waited and I waited to fulfill Ed's requests. It came after a lot of prayer. And I want to tell you something about this church and the people in it. I probably can't tell you anything new because a lot of you have been around so long. But this is a holy, holy place, a very holy place here. And if you pray to your saint, takes care of you, your guardian angel. In my case, it's the Holy Mother. And the reason for that is that when I was a boy in Cambridge, Massachusetts, I became an altar boy at the age of reason, which is 7. And I wanted to serve in the chapel because we had a beautiful, wonderful cathedral for a church. And the chapel was almost as big as the first 5 or 6 rows of the nave. And then in it was a grotto that was built with the Blessed Mother and 3 children. And I thought, what a wonderful piece that is. I would love to be part of that. So I went to our rector, and I asked him if I could be the person that served at 5 o'clock Mass every day at the grotto. And he said, "You're the first volunteer we've ever had in the history of the church. Once again, up at 5 in the morning and come and serve every day." But it was that much of a joy for me. There was something magic about that. And it was something about her face that the sculpture caught. I don't know if anybody else caught it or anybody else ever said anything about it. I know it was in my heart, and it stayed with me. I'm telling you that story because everything from there goes forward. Some of you got a handout. I don't know if all of you got it. If you look at just my history medically on that handout, me standing in front of you today is a miracle. That in itself, if you don't believe it happens, my standing here is a miracle. 6 bypasses in 1981. Okay? 6 more in 1986. I think we were at 10 or 11 congestive heart failures since then. As I stand before you, I'm in AFib right now. I'm going to have surgery in 2 weeks to get that straightened out. I've already gone through a couple of others, and I can go on and on. Somebody's tugging at me. Oh, I got a microphone. You know, something else I'll show you that I haven't seen in a long time. I just lost 70 pounds.
No. 30.
Thing I had. I hadn't seen my feet in 60 years. Those are good-looking feet. You should be ashamed of that. Those are good feet. There's nothing wrong with them.
Speak in the microphone.
Now you want me to talk into the microphone now? Gail runs the show here, if you haven't noticed. Okay? I'm going to tell you a story, and this is the story that convinced me that it was okay for me to get in front of a few people here and talk about having an experience with the hereafter, possibly one of the saints, somebody from the Holy Family. I've had an experience with that, but I waited until I had somebody sit right next to me that could see the same experience at the same exact time. And that's my wife, Gail. She was with me in '86 when I had the second open heart surgery. And Gail, come up, if you would, please. You can tell a little bit of it. It was time for me to go. The gurney had been put in the room for me to get on the gurney to go in and have the surgery. But I realized I hadn't had my communion yet. So I needed to run out and get a priest to serve me communion. And what happened, Gail?
Oh, this was in Milwaukee, and it happened to be the week of the diocesan conference, so there was not an Episcopal priest anywhere in the city. So we were at, the hospital was St. Mary's Hospital.
Surprise, surprise, surprise.
And there happened to be a Roman Catholic chaplain. So he came to the room to pray with John. And John asked if he could receive communion. And the chaplain said, "Well, are you Roman Catholic?" And John said, "Well, I was raised Roman Catholic. You know, I believe, you know, in the, you know, presence of, you know, Jesus in the body and everything." He said, "Nope, if you're not Roman Catholic, I cannot give you communion." But there was a nun with him, and the nun said, "Well, I will." So the nun gave his communion before his surgery, and that made him feel a lot more comforted before the surgery.
After the surgery, I said to Gail, instead of us just getting on the airplane and flying back home, why don't we get the cab driver to drive us around Milwaukee a little bit? Beautiful lake, get to see the town just a little bit, not long, but enough to eat up a little bit of time, and then we'll go have lunch at a small restaurant somewhere. So we did that. We got the cab driver to find us a little place to eat after we drove us around a bit. Well, he brought us to a place that was convenient to the hospital, and it was a very small restaurant, real small, and it was jam-packed. If we put the folks that are here today, that would have been a full house at the restaurant. It was just shoulder to shoulder. You could barely move it in there, and we're standing in the doorway. And I'm kind of tired because of just having the surgery the day before and everything. So I'm kind of looking for a spot to sit, but there's no place to go. But all of a sudden, here comes a nun. And she runs up, Mr. Landry, it's so good to see you. Oh, all my prayers have been answered. You look great. You look just wonderful. And I'm going, and I looked at Gail, and by the time I looked back, she was gone.
It's like, how did we end up in that restaurant? And the nun was, boom, right there in front of us. And then she was gone.
She's gone that fast. I mean, I looked over just to look at Gail to say, what just happened here, you know? Because if she wasn't an angel, I don't know where else we would have got one. I mean, think about what she did that day, especially being a nun in the Roman Catholic Church, where the man is in charge. He makes the decisions. Trust me, I was in parochial school for 13 years, so I know. And here she is stepping up to the plate to make sure that I'm comforted in my hour of need. And then this woman comes to this little bitty restaurant, okay? And she was only about that high, almost as big as Barbara Donnelly. Not quite, but just about that size. And she's there, and I'm just taken back by it. I mean, I'm just breathless about it. So I'm looking where I always look when I get breathless. That's my wife. Let her handle it, you know. So I looked over at her, and by the time I looked at her and looked back, she was gone. There's no way anybody could have got through that crowd without somebody seeing her going through that. So that's my witness. It's Gail. Where is Gail? Oh my God, I thought she was a nun for it. I thought she did the same trick. But to have that person be able to get in that restaurant, be able to get to me, say what she said, and then disappear that quick, just had to be something coming from heaven. It could not have been any other way done. There'd have been screaming and yelling and fighting. This is the earth, okay? There's other stories that I can share with you in the future, because that one little incident on that one day is still part of 3 or 4 things that happened that day that are also coming from heaven, okay? They're not as spectacular, and I don't have a witness except for Gail on part of it, but I don't have a way of saying, here's the pictures, here, short as Barbara Donnelly and all that. I can't do that. But there's things that happened and took place. The other thing that stands out is that I was going to wait and not tell you the name of the hospital until after the second surgery, because I didn't realize it was St. Mary's when I found a doctor that would take me. Nobody would touch me in Sarasota, Florida. It was 100% blockage, 99% blockage, and a 97% blockage. And I'm 38 years old, okay? And there just wasn't a thoracic surgeon around that could help me. So we wound up in Milwaukee after I persuaded some people to make some phone calls. But we wound up in Milwaukee, and I got through into the hospital, but I was very sick. So I didn't have a chance to see the name of the hospital or anything. And that as I'm being wheeled out, Gail where's Gail? She scares me like that. As being wheeled out, I said, stop the wheelchair. And the guy stopped, and I looked up, and there's the Blessed Mother, just like she was in the grotto when I was a boy. And of course, I'm an emotional guy to start with, and now everything is just pouring out of me, because I just realized that the guy that did me said, you'll be the first guy with 6 bypasses at age 38 years old. I was also the first man to have what they call which artery was it, Gail? Help me. I lost some brain cells.
What are you saying?
Talking about the artery.
Oh, the mammary artery.
Mammary. I was the first person to use the mammary artery and then bypass surgery. What my doctor did, he was quite unique. He was about the size of Barbara Donnelly, by the way. He was very short. I was looking through the nurse's legs, and the nurse was a man, so let's get that cleared up. But I looking through her legs, and there I could see Doctor standing there with it. And he was inside of my chest, and the team was there working with him. And he said, geez, he's so young, but he's been born with a liver that produces too much cholesterol. He said he's going to be back here in 5 or 6 years. We got to figure a way to lengthen that time. And so everybody started putting their thinking caps on. And one guy said, well, what's this over here? He said, the mammary artery. He said, well, what is it used for? To feed blood to the mammary. He said, well, he doesn't need that. Let's check it out. So he cut the mammary artery open. He took it from top to bottom, and he opened it up, and when he put his finger up in the artery, it was like silk. So just everything that would go through there wouldn't stay, like it was doing with like coronary arteries. Same with the saphenous vein they take out of your leg. Everything would stick when it would go through because it was part of that artery system. So he found this artery, it's like silk inside, and he attached it. To this day, I think I'm the only living male that has both the left and the right mammary arteries. Because in 1986, I had to go back. Guess which artery was the only one open and keeping me alive? The one that he had got that day. He said, that worked, let's put another one in. So he did the left one. So all the way to this day, that those stories just don't happen. That's the answer to prayer. We had, I think, a prayer vigil here at the church that lasted 24 hours. Our names like John Meyer. What was that one guy that used to do? Tom Holderness. There's about 8 or 9 fellows that we used to always run over to the Gillespie Hall and have coffee after Mass and talk a little bit. And they stayed up 24 hours and prayed for me. It's amazing. And you'll never make me believe that without those prayers and without the dedication of a lot of people in this church, I wouldn't be here. Because when you talk to the Blessed Mother, this is what I figured out. This is a secret. I shouldn't tell it to you, but I know this works. When you want something from Jesus, go to his mom. What Jewish mother could say no to her son? You know? And that's just what's happened. Every time, just before surgery, I'll say this one prayer that I've used each time, and I've had several surgeries, I'm afraid, but I always say the same prayer. If you need me up there, and it's a good job, all right, take me up now. I'm ready if you want me. But having said that, I've got these issues at home. I got this granddaughter that's, just a little flaky, and she needs some guidance. You know, I mean, if we can work it out, let me stay here. Well, that's happened twice, and I'm still here. And I still got the flaky granddaughter, you know. So I don't know how much more time we got. We got this new thing coming up in Monday, a week from Monday. It's called an ablation. It's not a new thing. The first one was for, what was the first one for? It was for a blockage. Huh? Atrial flutter. You ever heard of that? Anybody? I don't know what it is either. And now I've got atrial fibrillation, which means my heart rate won't go under 100 beats a minute. So we have to go and get that zapped and fixed. I've got a pacemaker. I've had rheumatic fever, 1954. There was no cure for rheumatic fever in 1954. They had penicillin. I was allergic to it. So I had to spend a year in bed. And the first thing I remember the doctor telling my parents at the time, he cannot be allowed to run. He must walk to school. Do not let him run. Okay? The first thing I asked for after the doctor left was a bicycle. He said not to run. He didn't say anything about the bicycle. All right? And I used that bike till the tires worn out. And then that little island of Nahant, that had hills that went just straight up like this and then straight down. That's what I used to build my heart muscle up. Because even the doctor that was doing the surgeries would look in and say, how in the world did you ever survive with 3 coronary arteries with these kinds of blockages? How can that happen? One more story, then I'm going to let it go. If I can remember which one it was. Oh dear. I'm still under the effects of the problem I just got. I just had something. I don't know if any of you experienced this, but I had a cold, a very bad cold. And it lasted almost a month and a half or so. And then it turned into my hyperthyroid. Anybody ever had that? Well, if you want to know something about anything, just come check with me, because I've had hyperthyroid. In other words, your thyroid just goes crazy. Starts doing all kinds of things. It taught me not to eat. So I didn't eat for how many days?
2 months.
2 months. I didn't eat for 2 months. That's why I can see my feet. Any food that was put in front of me smelled like it was rotten. So that helped me get through that time. But now I'm suffering from the effects of no nutrition for all that time. And my bones are brittle, and there's all kinds of side effects that came from this thing. But on the day that we were in the office, at the cardiologist's office, he said, I got great news, John. I said, what do you got? He said, we found out what made this artery goofed up. He said, we got it, we killed it, you're all set. He said, that's the good news. He said, oh. He said, by the way, he said, they took an EKG before they had checked me in. I had AFib. So that it's starting all over again, but we got the bad part out. But I think my message that I really want to get across to you is miracles are happening every day. You don't know where they are. You're not expecting them to be there. So pay attention. Coming to church once every week at least, anyway, pay attention. You'd be surprised how many are happening. We have people that do all kinds of wonderful things in this church, and they do it very quietly, and they make miracles happen. And they get that from here, from their prayers here. That's where it comes from. And they've carried it with them their whole lives. This church is a holy, holy place. Use it. Use it. That's what God gives us guardian angels for. That's why he gives people look after us when we're here. If it hadn't been for this woman, I wouldn't be here. Kids, stand up. She's taller than Barbara, so I want you to go to see. But this woman has been here, I think her family was here 60 years?
More,
okay.
Yeah.
And how many years have you got here?
64.
Would you let me tell a story about you?
No.
You wouldn't let me tell a story? Just that one little story.
No.
Okay. Why don't you go to the car and get something?
No.
Okay, all right. She's shy and she won't let me do it. But there's going to be a sick day someday. When there is, I'll get the lectern somehow and tell you the story about Gail. Okay? Thank you so much for being such good listeners. God bless all of you.